Mike Nichols made his directorial debut in 1966 with the film Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. The screenplay was done by Ernest Lehman, which was adapted from Edward Albee's 1962 play that had the same name. The movie stars Elizabeth Taylor as Martha, Richard Burton as George, George Siegel as Nick, and Sandy Dennis as Honey. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor's characters are a middle-aged married couple whose charged relationship is defined by unbelievable verbal battles. But underneath all the yelling and screaming, there's an emotional dependence that they have for each other. This abuse is completely fueled by the excessive consumption of alcohol. The character of George being an associate professor of history in a university where Martha's father is the president adds a whole new dimension to their relationship. Late one Saturday evening, after a faculty mixer, Martha invites Nick, played by George Siegel, and Honey, played by Sandy Dennis, over to their house for a nightcap. Siegel's character is an ambitious young biology professor that's new to the university, and with that comes his mousy wife, played by Sandy Dennis. As the evening progresses, the two end up consuming more and more alcohol. They get caught up in George and Martha's games of needing to hurt each other and everyone around them. But the ultimate abuse comes in the form of talk about George and Martha's unseen 16-year-old son. The movie holds a very special place in Oscar history. It's one of only 2 films to get Oscar nominations in every single category that it was eligible for. The other film to achieve this feat was Cimarron from 1931, but things were entirely different then. There were only 9 categories that year, 7 which applied to Cimarron. It was the first production to have 100% of its credited cast, all 4 of them, be nominated for Oscars. This feat has been duplicated a couple of times after this with the 1972 drama Sleuth. That was a 2-person drama. And Give 'Em Hell Harry from 1975, which was a James Whitmore one-man show about Harry Truman. The last of the original Warner Brothers had wanted the movie rights to this production as soon as he saw the play on Broadway in 1962. But most of Hollywood assumed that regardless of the play's popularity, its profanity and sexual frankness made it just entirely unable to be filmed. But the screenwriter, Ernest Lehman, convinced Warner that it could be done. Warner ended up paying the playwright, Edward Albee, $500,000 for the movie rights, plus 10% of the gross after the film earned $6 million. Jack Warner originally wanted to star Bette Davis and James Mason in this project. They were both in their late 50s, which made them the right age for the roles. And the screenwriter was particularly delighted by the prospect of Davis playing Martha, who quotes Bette Davis in the movie by saying, "What a dump." This is in the first scene and comes from a line in the 1949 movie Beyond the Forest. But even if he could get the script past the censors, this dark, dialogue-heavy film was going to be a really tough sell to audiences. The screenwriter eventually told Warner that what they needed was some really big stars to play these roles, and he went on to suggest Elizabeth Taylor. Henry Fonda was one of the names that came up for the character of George when they were doing the casting considerations, but his agent wouldn't even show him the play or the script. That just shows how controversial the dialogue in this film was. The 60s just wasn't used to having audiences exposed to this kind of film. Elizabeth Taylor had to be talked into the role. She wasn't too sure about it. She had the right star power to make it a box office hit, but she was a beautiful woman in her early 30s. She was really all wrong to play a bitter, middle-aged woman as seen in the film. She told the production people this and just wasn't convinced that this was right for her. But her husband, Richard Burton, convinced her to do it. He told her to take it on as a challenge. She took a $500,000 salary plus 10% of the gross. That's the same deal that the playwright got. Her husband, Burton, got a flat $750,000. Although the title was obviously inspired by the song Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf, sung by Walt Disney's Three Little Pigs from 1933, Warner Brothers was unable to negotiate with Disney for the use of this tune. So when the characters sing the title phrase, it was instead set to the melody of Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor were definitely forces to be reckoned with while they were working, but it was a real challenge to get them in front of the camera every day. They both had in their contracts that they didn't have to be on the set until 10 a.m., even though most other productions began at dawn. After they arrived on the set, it would usually take about 2 hours for makeup, hair, and wardrobe. Then they would finally be ready to do the shooting. By that time, it was lunchtime. They would often go out for lengthy, cocktail-filled lunches, and then they'd return late in the afternoon to finally begin shooting. They would always be jovial and tell the director, "Hey, we're sorry we're late. Okay, let's get busy and shoot this thing." Sometimes they wouldn't come back until about 5 o'clock, and they had in their contracts that they couldn't work past 6. So they would basically get 1 hour of filming done in this entire day. Now, even though working with Taylor and Burton was kind of troublesome for Mike Nichols, when they were in front of the camera, their performances were just absolutely stunning and powerful. It was everything that he expected from them. But the studio just wasn't quite as understanding about the 30 days that he was running behind schedule and the budget just soaring because of this. The studio really thought about kicking the director off the film, and they really tried to do it. But they knew if they fired him, the Burtons would just walk off the set. The director was advised early on by a colleague to fire somebody on the very first day. This would be a way to establish authority on the set. Nichols at the time was completely new to filmmaking and took all the help that he could get from other people. He decided to do what they said. That unlucky person on the receiving end was the first assistant director. This all happened when Nichols heard him say on the first shot of the first day, "Oh well, it's just another picture." This dismissive nonchalance irritated the director strongly, and he fired him on the spot. Now the movie is just loaded with words, phrases, and dialogue that the big screen had never seen before. And it was much, much worse in the play. Looking back on this, it's amazing that they got it through the censors and onto the screen. It's said that this is like shooting a flaming arrow into a haystack, and that haystack being the Motion Picture Association of America and their production code office. They put an enormous amount of pressure on Mike Nichols to make certain changes. For instance, the scene towards the beginning of the movie where Martha ends up yelling, "Screw you," to her husband just as he opens the door to their guest. Elizabeth Taylor had already shot this scene and said that line as it was written. Warner Brothers had the director change that line to "damn you," which Taylor ended up re-recording. Since this new phrase clearly didn't fit over the words her mouth was saying on the footage, they used a shot of her and her back as she starts to say it, with a shot of Richard Burton opening the door. Even with this line changed, the production code office refused to give this movie its seal of approval, citing that its overall content and language was just too vulgar. Eventually, the Motion Picture Association of America decided to grant this movie an unprecedented exemption as a special and important film, and that it didn't exploit language for the language's sake, but they did require for the film to have a warning with it. That warning said that no one under the age of 18 will be admitted unless accompanied by a parent or guardian. It was the very first movie to carry such a label, which would actually go on to be commonplace a few years later when they put in the new rating system. If you want to see some superb acting and a well-written script, Take the time to watch this movie. It really is a well-done picture, setting aside the controversy that's involved in its production. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.